Hello, welcome to our YouTube channel. Today we're joined by our Centre Director, Professor Alex de Ruyter. So Alex, last night MPs gave their final backing to government plans to override parts of its Brexit agreement with the EU. The legislation, which passed through the House of Commons by 340 votes to 256, will obviously now go to the House of Lords. The government says it will help to protect the integrity of the UK, but the UK's 5 living former Prime Ministers have all spoken out against the bill. So what happens now?
Well, Beth, the bill will go into the House of Lords, where it is likely to face substantial opposition, not least by former Conservative leader Michael Howard. So it is likely that peers will amend the bill before sending it back to the Commons, where it'll be reconsidered. I would expect that the bill will just face a ping pong between Commons and the House of Lords, although after 3 amendments, of course, the Commons does have the power to overrule the Lords. So on the current slant, I'd expect it to eventually go through. The Conservative MPs who've expressed reservations about breaking international law still overwhelmingly favour having an internal market across the UK, ostensibly on the premise of being able to then have trade deals that apply to the whole of the UK. And of course, driving a coach and horses through the existing devolution settlement, which many Tories hate anyway. But of course, let's not forget that the most contentious element of the internal market bill, notwithstanding that it drives a coach and horses through the devolution settlement with the Scottish and Welsh and Northern Irish governments, of course, is its explicit intent to override international law, particularly that of the protocol in the withdrawal agreement with the EU as pertains to Northern Ireland. The EU made it abundantly clear to the government if they don't pull the offending pieces in the legislation by the end of the month, they will instigate some form of sanction, legal proceedings, which could include financial sanctions or trade sanctions. The government has shown no signs of backing down on this, so it remains to be seen what will happen. But of course, that it's further poisoned the climate of negotiations, in my mind, makes a deal less likely than it would have been.
So in the news today then is that Britain's car industry risks losing out even if there is a post-Brexit trade deal with the EU. With car parts from Japan and Turkey using the UK will not be treated as British, so some exports may face higher tariffs. In a letter, Britain's chief Brexit negotiator said the UK has failed so far to get the car parts deal it wants and obviously cannot insist on it. So is having enough parts sourced within the UK and in the EU then the key to a free trade deal then?
Well, look, in any trade deal, of course, manufacturers need to demonstrate that a certain percentage, typically around 55%, of an export's value originates in the country in question in order to benefit from reduced tariffs. This stops a manufacturer producing 95% of a car in China, then exporting it to the UK, and then doing the remaining 5% in the UK before claiming it's a UK product in a trade deal, and therefore eligible for reduced tariffs. Now, if a car is manufactured in the UK with parts from the EU, then it is pretty sensible, I would say, for the EU to include the bits made in the EU as part of that 55%, which is what's called bilateral cumulation. Everyone agrees on this. However, some trade deals, but not all, also allow something called diagonal accumulation. So if the EU has a trade deal with Japan and the UK also has a trade deal with Japan, then you might argue that the UK should be allowed to count parts imported from Japan within its 55%. Now, this is what the EU is objecting to. Neither position is unreasonable in trade negotiations. Some treaties allow it, but many don't. So, for most manufacturers at the moment, then, this is not terminal. Most, if not all, should clear the content for with parts from the UK and the EU, although Toyota and Nissan both do use a lot of Japanese content. The challenge comes from the future. The batteries in electric cars make up a large proportion of the total cost. If they're sourced from Japan or Korea or Turkey, will there still be sufficient local content in UK manufactured cars to enable them to take advantage of zero tariff conditions?
And the Commons will vote later today on renewing coronavirus legislation, which was passed actually at the start of the pandemic in March, which gives the government sweeping powers to act, but obviously has to be extended every 6 months. With at least 16.6 million people in the UK subject to local lockdowns at the moment, a growing number of MPs think that these numbers are just disproportionate, even though they have been obviously often requested by local leaders. So do you think MPs should have more of a say in this, Or actually, should it be the decision of the local authority?
Well, I think there are two main points here. The first is whether the Commons should be allowed a greater say over restrictions, national as well as local. And I would say that would be a sensible approach. You know, they are there to exert scrutiny on the government after all. So, of course, when passing laws that criminalise any form of activity, I think it's only right they have a say. However, against that, we need to balance this against the speed at which the government might need to act. It was clear in March, and arguably on occasion since, that things did not move as quickly as they should have. Having to pass things in Parliament might slow that further. The second point is over who has responsibility for local lockdowns. Certainly in Scotland and Wales, that's devolved to their respective governments. Surely it would make sense for there to be greater devolution to the English regions as well. After all, they are likely to know the local situation better than anyone.
Thanks for joining us, Alex.
You're welcome.